The mahogany doors of the study stood closed, sealing Iris Dalton's fate inside with the scent of old leather and her stepmother's perfume. Through the crack beneath the door, she could hear Constance's voice, honey-sweet and venomous in equal measure, addressing the family solicitor. Iris's fingers traced the worn fabric of her simple blue dress, so different from the emerald silk her stepmother wore. Once, Iris had owned gowns like that. Once, this had been her father's house. And what of Miss Iris? The solicitor's voice drifted through. Constance's laugh rang out like crystal shattering on marble. Oh, read it. Let everyone hear what dear Edmund truly thought of his daughter. Iris's breath caught. The servants had gathered in the hallway behind her, their pitying eyes burning into her back. Mrs. Davies, the housekeeper who'd known her since childhood, reached out but Iris shook her head. She had to hear this. She had to know. The door swung open with theatrical timing. Constance stood framed in the doorway, triumph glittering in her cold blue eyes, a small velvet box held mockingly in her gloved hand. My dear Iris, her stepmother purred, loud enough for everyone to hear. Do come in. The solicitor has such interesting news about your inheritance. Iris stepped forward on trembling legs, aware of every eye upon her. The drawing room that had once been her sanctuary now felt like a courtroom. Constance's daughter, her stepsister Rowena, sat perched on the velvet settee, barely suppressing a smirk behind her fan. The solicitor, Mr. Pritchard, cleared his throat uncomfortably. His weathered hands shuffled through the papers as if searching for words that weren't there. Miss Iris Dalton, he began, his voice strained, according to your late father's will, dated the 6th of March, you are bequeathed. He paused, glancing nervously at Constance. A single item. A brass compass that belonged to your mother. The room erupted in whispered gasps. A compass? Rowena's voice dripped with false sympathy. Oh Iris, how quaint. Constance pressed the small box into Iris's palm, her fingers cold as ice even through the gloves. Your father's final message to you, my dear. Perhaps he wanted you to find your way, elsewhere. The servants wouldn't meet her eyes. The neighbors shook their heads. Even Mr. Pritchard looked away. Iris's vision blurred as she stared at the box. A compass. Nothing more. If that will be all, Constance began, already turning away in dismissal. The front doors crashed open. The sound reverberated through the house like thunder, silencing every whisper, every pitying glance. Cold autumn air rushed into the stifling room, carrying with it the scent of rain and horses. Heavy footsteps echoed in the marble foyer. Iris looked up through her tears to see a figure emerging from the shadows of the doorway. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black riding clothes that spoke of wealth and power. His dark hair was windswept, his jaw set with barely contained fury. The room seemed to shrink around him. Lord Thorne. Mr. Pritchard shot to his feet, papers scattering. Your Grace, we weren't expecting. No, the Duke's voice cut through the air like a blade, his eyes fixed not on the solicitor, not on Constance's suddenly pale face, but on Iris. I imagine you weren't. He moved into the room with the confidence of a man who owned it, who owned everything. His gaze dropped to the small box in Iris's shaking hands, and something dark flickered across his features. When he spoke again, his voice was deadly quiet. I'm afraid, Mr. Pritchard, that you've read from the wrong will. The silence that followed was absolute. Constance's face drained of color beneath her rouge. What do you mean, wrong will? Lord Thorne reached into his coat and withdrew a sealed document, the wax bearing a crest Iris recognized, her father's signet ring. Edmund Dalton was not only my closest friend but my business partner. He entrusted me with his true last testament 3 days before his death, along with explicit instructions. He handed the document to Mr. Pritchard, whose hands trembled as he broke the seal. He suspected, the Duke continued, his eyes never leaving Constance's face, that his wife might attempt to alter his wishes. So he made certain arrangements. Mr. Pritchard's voice shook as he read, I, Edmund Dalton, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath my entire estate, Dalton Manor, all properties, investments, and holdings, to my beloved daughter, Iris and Dalton, with Lord Julian Thorne, Duke of Ashbourne, serving as trustee until her 23rd birthday. Iris couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The compass box slipped from her fingers, clattering to the floor. The Duke finally looked at her, and in his storm-grey eyes, she saw something that terrified her more than her stepmother's cruelty ever had. He saw her. Really saw her. "Miss Dalton," he said softly, extending his hand. "I believe we have much to discuss." Behind him, Constance's mask finally shattered. "No. No. That document is a forgery. Edmund would never." Edmund Dalton, the Duke's voice turned to ice, died under suspicious circumstances. "And I have questions, Lady Dalton. Many questions." The servants were whispering now, their shock palpable. Rowena had gone white as snow. Mr. Pritchard frantically scanned the document, nodding slowly. "It's legitimate," the solicitor breathed. "The signatures, the seal, the witnesses. This is the true will." Iris stood frozen, caught between the ruins of one life and the terrifying possibility of another. The Duke's hand remained extended, patient, unwavering. In that moment, she had a choice: remain in the ashes of who she'd been, or step forward into the unknown. She placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm, solid, real. "Good," he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. "Because, Miss Dalton, your stepmother isn't the only one with secrets. And if we're going to save your life, we need to start with the truth about how your father really died." The study door closed behind Iris with a sound like a tomb sealing shut. Lord Thorne gestured to the leather chair opposite his desk, but she remained standing, the brass compass clutched so tightly in her palm that the metal edges bit into her skin. "Sit, Miss Dalton," he said quietly. Not a command. An invitation. She sat because her legs wouldn't hold her any longer. Through the window behind him, rain began to fall, blurring the world outside into watercolor grays. How different this room was from the one she'd grown up in. Her father's study had smelled of pipe tobacco and old books, filled with warm lamplight and his booming laugh. That room was gone now, transformed by Constance into something cold and formal, all the warmth scrubbed away like bloodstains from marble. "Your father and I met at Cambridge," Lord Thorne began, settling into his chair with the ease of a man who'd learned to carry the weight of other people's secrets. "I was studying law. He was supposed to be studying engineering but spent most of his time in the stables, breeding the fastest horses in 3 counties. Iris's throat tightened. She remembered those horses. Remembered her father lifting her onto a saddle when she was 6, his hands steady and sure, his voice telling her she was brave, she was fearless, she was his little navigator. "He called you that, didn't he? His navigator." Lord Thorne's eyes were too knowing, seeing straight through to the grief she'd buried so deep she'd almost convinced herself it wasn't there. "Because your mother loved maps and stars and finding her way through the world." "How do you know that?" The words came out sharp, defensive. "Because Edmund talked about both of you endlessly. His brilliant wife who could plot a course by starlight. His daughter who inherited her mother's gift for always knowing true north." He leaned forward. "That compass isn't worthless, Iris. Open it." Her fingers trembled as she found the hidden clasp her father had shown her once, years ago, before her mother died. Before everything turned gray. The compass face lifted away to reveal a hollow interior. Inside lay a tiny key and a slip of paper covered in her father's cramped handwriting. The numbers meant nothing to her at first. Then she saw the pattern. Coordinates. He knew, she whispered. He knew something was wrong. He knew he was dying. Lord Thorne's voice carried the weight of old grief, old guilt. "4 months before his death, he came to me. Said he'd been feeling weak, dizzy. The doctors called it his heart, but Edmund was 43 and healthy as an ox. He suspected poison. Small doses, impossible to prove, slowly administered over months. The rain hammered against the windows now, matching the frantic rhythm of Iris's pulse. Constance. He couldn't prove it. That's why he came to me, changed his will in secret, and hid the evidence of his suspicions where only you would think to look. He nodded at the compass. Those coordinates lead to his safety deposit box at Barclays. Inside, he documented everything. Every symptom, every strange meal, every time Constance sent the servants away and made his tea herself. Iris's stomach turned. She'd watched her father waste away, had held his hand as he struggled to breathe, had believed the doctors when they said his heart simply gave out. But she remembered other things now, too. Constance's tight smiles when he declined dinner. The way she'd watched him like a cat watches a wounded bird, patient and predatory. Why didn't he expose her? Because he was afraid for you. Lord Thorne's jaw tightened. If he accused her and couldn't prove it, she'd have turned society against him, against you. But if he died and the truth came out after, you'd be protected by his will, by me, by the law. He sacrificed himself to save you. The words broke something in Iris that had been cracking for 3 years. She bent forward, a sob tearing from her chest, and Lord Thorne was around the desk in an instant, pressing a handkerchief into her shaking hands. He loved you, he said softly. Everything he did was to keep you safe. Including making me promise that I would see you restored to your rightful place, no matter what it cost me. Outside the study, a door slammed. Voices rose in anger. Constance's cut through the rest like a blade. You cannot keep her from me. I am her guardian. Lord Thorne's expression hardened. He moved to the door, then paused, looking back at Iris. You have 2 choices, Miss Dalton. Stay here as my ward, learning to claim your birthright, finding the evidence your father died to preserve. Or return to that house, to her, and let his sacrifice mean nothing. The study door flew open. Constance stood framed in the doorway, her elegant composure fracturing at the edges. Behind her, Iris could see Rowena and Mr. Pritchard, all 3 looking like they'd witnessed the end of the world. You have poisoned her mind against me, Constance hissed, but her eyes were on the compass in Iris's hands. That belongs to the estate. To me. No, Iris said, and her voice came out stronger than she expected. It belongs to my mother. And my father gave it to me for a reason. Constance's smile turned venomous. Your father was a sentimental fool who died penniless and left you dependent on the charity of strangers. Come home, Iris. This is embarrassing. Iris looked at the compass, at the key hidden inside, at the coordinates that would lead her to the truth. Then she looked at Lord Thorne, who was watching her with an expression that said he would support whatever choice she made but hoped desperately she'd make the right one. She thought of her father's hands, steady and sure, lifting her onto that horse. Teaching her to be brave. I'm staying, she said. Constance's face went white with rage. You'll regret this. I will fight you for every penny, every property, every scrap of the Dalton name. And when I'm done, Lord Thorne, I'll destroy you too for turning my stepdaughter against me. Try, Lord Thorne said coldly. But know this, if you come for her, you come for me. And Lady Dalton, I have resources you cannot imagine and patience you've never learned. Your reign over that house ends today. Constance turned on her heel and swept from the room, Rowena scurrying after her like a frightened mouse. The silence that followed felt like the moment after a storm passes, when the world is holding its breath. Iris closed the compass and felt its weight settle in her palm. Not worthless. Never worthless. A key to the truth. A path forward. True north. Where do we start? She asked. Lord Thorne's expression softened into something that might have been pride. Tomorrow morning, we retrieve your father's documents. Tonight, you rest. And Iris? He met her eyes. Your stepmother will fight with everything she has. This will get worse before it gets better. Are you certain? She thought of 3 years spent as a servant in her own home. 3 years of silence and shame and swallowing her grief. 3 years of Constance's poison, served with a smile. I'm certain, Iris said. Let her fight. This time, I'll fight back. The carriage wheels crunched over gravel as Thornfield Hall emerged from the morning mist like something out of a dream. Iris pressed her palm against the cold window glass, watching the estate materialize, all grey stone and climbing ivy, windows catching the weak autumn sun like watchful eyes. Nothing like Dalton Manor with its pretentious columns and manicured gardens. This place felt alive somehow, rooted in the earth, ancient and enduring. It's not much, Lord Thorne said from the opposite seat, though his tone suggested he was testing her reaction rather than apologizing. It's beautiful, Iris said, and meant it. The carriage door opened before they'd fully stopped. A man in his 60s stood at the base of the steps, silver-haired and ramrod-straight, his eyes sharp as he assessed her with the efficiency of someone who'd spent a lifetime reading people. Graves, Lord Thorne said, stepping down and extending his hand to help Iris. This is Miss Dalton. She'll be staying with us indefinitely. Miss Dalton. Graves bowed, but there was warmth in his formal greeting. Welcome to Thornfield. Your rooms have been prepared. Iris's fingers tightened on Lord Thorne's as she descended. Her rooms. Not the servants' quarters she'd inhabited for 3 years, not the cold attic where Constance had banished her. Actual rooms, plural, prepared for her arrival. The entrance hall stole her breath. Where Dalton Manor had become all cold marble and Constance's gaudy taste, Thornfield possessed a quiet elegance. Dark wood paneling, Persian rugs worn soft by generations of feet, portraits of stern-faced ancestors who looked like they'd had opinions about everything. The air smelled of beeswax and old books and wood smoke, and something in Iris's chest loosened for the first time in 3 years. Miss Dalton will take dinner in her rooms tonight, Lord Thorne was saying to Graves. She's had rather a trying day. My lord, if I may. A woman appeared from a side corridor, her grey dress impeccable, her face kind despite its severity. I'm Mrs. Fletcher, the housekeeper. Let me show Miss Dalton to her quarters. I imagine she'd appreciate a hot bath and fresh clothes. Iris glanced at Lord Thorne, who nodded. Go. Rest. We'll talk in the morning. She followed Mrs. Fletcher up the grand staircase, her hand trailing along the polished banister. The housekeeper maintained a steady stream of gentle conversation, the history of the house, the schedule of meals, the names of staff, but Iris barely heard her. She was too busy trying not to cry at the simple kindness of it all. No one had spoken to her with such casual respect in 3 years. No one had offered her a hot bath. No one had called her Miss Dalton instead of girl or nothing at all. The rooms, took up the entire corner of the second floor. A bedroom with a 4-poster bed dressed in cream linens, a sitting room with chairs positioned to catch the afternoon light, a private dressing room where someone had already laid out a sage green dress that looked close to her size. Lord Thorne had me send for these this morning, Mrs. Fletcher said, gesturing to the wardrobe full of dresses. They belonged to his late cousin. Similar build to you, she was. We've been keeping them maintained. Such a waste to let them gather dust. Iris ran her fingers over the silk and wool, the fine cotton and soft velvet. Colors she'd forgotten existed. Fabrics that didn't scratch or hang limp from too many washings. I'll send up hot water, Mrs. Fletcher said gently. Take your time, my dear. You're safe here. The door clicked shut and Iris was alone in a room that was hers, wearing a servant's threadbare dress in a space meant for a lady. She caught sight of herself in the full-length mirror and barely recognized the girl staring back. Thin, yes, from 3 years of eating scraps. Dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights and endless work. But her mother's eyes looked back at her, gray-green like storm clouds, alive with something that hadn't quite been extinguished despite Constance's best efforts. The bath arrived in a parade of servants who smiled at her, who called her Miss, who asked if the temperature was suitable and if she needed anything else. Iris sank into the copper tub and let the heat seep into her bones, washing away 3 years of cold floors and colder treatment. She scrubbed her hands until they bled, trying to erase the evidence of hard labor, the calluses, the rough skin, the permanent dirt under her nails. But some stains went deeper than soap could reach. Dinner came on a silver tray. Real food, not kitchen scraps. Roasted chicken and glazed carrots, fresh bread with butter, a slice of apple tart that tasted like her childhood. Iris ate slowly, savoring every bite, half afraid someone would burst through the door and snatch it away, tell her she didn't deserve such things. She dressed in the sage green gown and stood before the mirror again. The transformation was startling. The dress fit perfectly, highlighting the figure that 3 years of poverty couldn't quite erase. With her hair clean and brushed, falling in dark waves past her shoulders, she looked almost like the girl she'd been before her father died. Almost. A knock at the door made her jump. "Miss Dalton." A young woman entered, barely older than Iris herself, with copper hair and a mischievous smile. "I'm Lady Margot Thorne, Julian's sister. I hope you don't mind the intrusion, but I couldn't wait until morning to meet you. My brother's been so mysterious about the whole affair." Iris blinked at the informality, at the frank curiosity in Lady Margot's green eyes. I know, I should have sent word and waited for permission and done the proper thing," Margot continued, sweeping into the room like she owned it, which, technically, she did. "But propriety is so tedious, don't you think? Besides, Julian said you'd been living as a servant in your own home for 3 years, which means you're probably desperate for real conversation. Am I right?" Something unexpected bubbled up in Iris's throat. Laughter. Actual laughter. "You are," she said, and her voice sounded strange to her own ears, lighter somehow, younger. Margot grinned and threw herself into one of the chairs. "Excellent. Then let's dispense with formalities. You can call me Margot when we're alone, everyone does. And I'll call you Iris because Miss Dalton makes you sound like a governess. Now, tell me everything." Julian's letter was maddeningly vague. Something about a false will and a wicked stepmother and evidence of murder. Iris sank into the opposite chair, the compass heavy in her pocket where she transferred it to the new dress. In the firelight, with Margot's eager, kind face watching her, the whole nightmare of the past 3 years suddenly felt manageable. Shareable, even. "It's rather a long story," Iris said carefully. "The best ones always are." Margot leaned forward, her expression shifting from playful to serious in an instant. "Listen, Iris. I know we've just met, but Julian doesn't bring people here lightly. He doesn't involve himself in other people's problems unless he cares deeply. If he's taken you under his protection, it's because he believes you deserve it. And if he believes it, then so do I. So please, let me help. Let me be your friend. God knows you could use one." The words hit something raw in Iris's chest. A friend. When was the last time she'd had a friend? Before her father remarried, certainly. Before her world narrowed to chores and cruelty and silence. "I could," Iris whispered. "Use a friend, I mean." Margot's smile returned, bright and fierce. "Then you've got one. Now, tell me about this stepmother of yours. And don't leave out any details. If we're going to destroy her, I want to know exactly what we're up against." Outside, rain began to fall again, pattering against the windows. But inside, for the first time in 3 years, Iris felt warm. She pulled the compass from her pocket and began to talk. The morning sun found Iris in the library, surrounded by ledgers that documented her father's business dealings. Numbers had always made sense to her in a way that people didn't, clean, logical, impossible to manipulate with a smile or a lie. These accounts told a story Constance had tried to erase. Edmund Dalton hadn't died penniless at all. He'd been extraordinarily wealthy. Discovering your inheritance's true value? Lord Thorne's voice came from the doorway, and Iris looked up to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Discovering how thoroughly I was deceived. She gestured to the papers spread across the mahogany desk. My father owned shipping contracts, railway investments, property in 3 counties. Constance claimed he'd gambled it all away, that we were drowning in debt. But these records are immaculate, Lord Thorne finished, moving into the room. Edmund was many things, but reckless wasn't one of them. Every penny accounted for, every investment strategic. He built an empire specifically so you'd never be at anyone's mercy. The irony burned. Her father had died trying to protect her, and she'd spent 3 years completely at Constance's mercy anyway. I need to learn this, Iris said abruptly. All of it. Estate management, investments, contracts. If I'm going to reclaim what's mine, I can't just be a name on paper. I need to understand how to run it. Something flickered in Lord Thorne's eyes, respect, maybe, or approval. Then we begin today. But first, he held out his hand. There's something else you need to relearn. She stared at his outstretched palm, confused. Dancing, Miss Dalton. You'll need to navigate society if you're going to reclaim your position. And society dances. The music room smelled of lemon oil and old wood. A pianoforte stood in the corner, and Margot sat perched on its bench, fingers already moving across the keys in a gentle waltz. She grinned at Iris's obvious discomfort. Don't look so terrified, Margot called. Julian's an excellent dancer when he's not being insufferably serious about everything. I haven't danced in 3 years, Iris protested as Lord Thorne guided her to the center of the room. I'm not sure I remember. Your body will remember. His hand settled at her waist, warm through the thin fabric of her morning dress. His other hand clasped hers, and Iris became acutely aware of how close they were standing, how his thumb rested against her palm, how she could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. Ready? He asked softly. The music swelled and they moved. Iris stumbled at first, her feet clumsy after years of scrubbing floors instead of gliding across ballrooms. But Lord Thorne was patient, his lead firm and clear, guiding her through the steps until muscle memory took over. 1 2 3, 1 2 3, turning and turning while Margot's playing filled the room with something bittersweet and beautiful. There, Lord Thorne murmured. You remember. She did. More than the steps, she remembered what it felt like to be a person worthy of dancing with, worthy of gentle hands and careful guidance. Worthy of taking up space in a room instead of shrinking against walls, invisible. Their eyes met and held. The music continued but Iris barely heard it over the thundering of her own pulse. They were too close, moving in perfect synchronization, and something in Lord Thorne's expression made her breath catch. He looked at her like she was precious. Like she mattered. Like. Mind if I cut in? Margot's cheerful voice shattered the moment. You two look far too serious for a waltz. Lord Thorne released Iris almost reluctantly, stepping back with a slight bow. She's all yours. But his eyes lingered on Iris's face for one more heartbeat before he left the room. The afternoon brought different lessons. Lord Thorne taught her to read contracts, to spot the subtle language that could trap or free, to understand what she was signing before she signed it. He showed her investment portfolios and explained market fluctuations, and Iris absorbed it all with a hunger that surprised them both. You have your father's mind, he said at one point, watching her calculate compound interest in her head. He could look at numbers and see stories. You do the same thing. Then why didn't he teach me before he died? The question escaped before she could stop it, raw and bitter. Lord Thorne set down his pen, his expression troubled. Because he thought he had time. Because men like him always think they have time. He paused. And because teaching you would have made Constance suspicious. If she'd known you were learning to manage the estate, she might have acted faster. More decisively. She might have poisoned me too, you mean? Yes. The word was brutal in its honesty. Edmund chose to die protecting your ignorance because ignorance kept you safe. But now the truth is out, and ignorance will get you killed. The word settled heavy between them. Outside, clouds gathered dark on the horizon. That evening, Iris found herself in the estate office, Lord Thorn at her side as she approved her first expenditure, wages for the household staff at Thornfield. Her signature looked strange on the ledger, official and real in a way that made her hands shake. "What if I'm not ready for this?" she whispered. "You are." Lord Thorn's voice was certain. "You approved fair wages without question. You asked about the staff's needs before your own. Your first act as a woman of means was to ensure others were cared for. That's not weakness, Iris. That's power used well." Her name on his lips sent warmth through her chest. He'd called her Miss Dalton all week, proper and distant. This slip felt intimate, intentional. A commotion erupted in the entrance hall, raised voices, someone demanding entry. Graves appeared in the doorway, his usual composure cracked. "My lord, Lady Dalton is here. With magistrates. She's demanding Miss Dalton's immediate return, claiming unlawful detainment and manipulation of a vulnerable young woman." He paused, his expression grave. "She's also brought documentation claiming Miss Dalton is mentally unsound and requires her guardian's care." The blood drained from Iris's face. Mentally unsound. The ultimate trap. If Constance convinced the magistrates that Iris was incapable of managing her own affairs, she could be locked away in an asylum, declared incompetent, stripped of everything. Lord Thorn's jaw tightened. "How many magistrates?" "3, my lord. All men who've done business with Lady Dalton in the past." "Bought and paid for, then." Constance had come prepared. Lord Thorn turned to Iris, and in his eyes she saw both fury and fear, not for himself, but for her. "This is it. Your first real test. You can hide upstairs and let me handle this, or you can face them. Face her. Show them the woman you're becoming." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to something fierce and intimate. "But Iris, if you go down there, she will try to break you. She will say things designed to make you doubt yourself, to make you seem unstable. Can you hold yourself together?" Iris thought of the compass in her pocket. Of her father's sacrifice. Of 3 years spent silent and small while Constance rewrote reality itself. "I can," she said, and stood. "Let's show them exactly how sane I am." Lord Thorn's smile was sharp as a blade. "Then let's go to war." The drawing room felt like a courtroom. 3 magistrates sat arranged on the settee like judges at a tribunal, their expressions ranging from skeptical to outright hostile. Constance stood by the fireplace, dressed in widow's black that she'd never actually worn during her supposed mourning period, her face a perfect mask of concerned stepmother. Iris entered with Lord Thorn at her side, Margot trailing behind like a copper-haired guardian angel. Every eye turned to assess her, to find evidence of the instability Constance had promised them. "Gentlemen," Lord Thorn said smoothly, "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding, Lord Thorn," said the eldest magistrate, a portly man with mutton chops and calculating eyes, "is how you came to be harboring a young woman of questionable mental capacity without her legal guardian's consent." "Questionable mental capacity?" Iris kept her voice level despite the rage building in her chest. "Based on what evidence, precisely?" Constance's smile was sympathetic, poisonous. "Darling, you've been through such trauma. Your father's death, the stress of managing household duties beyond your capabilities. Lord Thorn has clearly taken advantage of your vulnerable state, filling your head with fantasies about inheritance and murder conspiracies." "Murder conspiracies." Iris repeated the words carefully, letting them hang in the air. "Interesting that you'd use that particular phrase when no one has mentioned murder yet." Unless, of course, you have reason to think my father's death wasn't natural. Constance's smile flickered. Just for a moment, but Iris saw it. So did Lord Thorn. Miss Dalton makes an excellent point, he said. Lady Dalton, how did you know the nature of our concerns about your late husband's death? It's obvious what you're implying with this whole charade. Constance recovered quickly, turning to the magistrates. Gentlemen, my stepdaughter has always had an overactive imagination. Even as a child, she invented elaborate stories. Her father indulged it, called it creativity. But after his death, these fantasies took on a darker tone. She began accusing servants of theft, claiming people were plotting against her. I've been protecting her, keeping her safe at home where she couldn't embarrass herself or the family name. Is that why you had me sleeping in the servants' quarters? Iris asked quietly. To protect me? You insisted on it. Said the main bedrooms frightened you. And the fact that I worked 16-hour days scrubbing floors? Was that my idea too? One of the younger magistrates shifted uncomfortably. Constance noticed. Manual labor is therapeutic for troubled minds, she said quickly. The doctors recommended keeping her hands busy, her mind occupied with simple tasks. Which doctors? Lord Thorn's voice was sharp as glass. Provide their names. We'll verify this recommendation. Constance's jaw tightened. I don't recall the specific, they were consultations, informal. Convenient. Margot spoke up for the first time, her tone dripping sarcasm. My brother consulted with 3 physicians about Miss Dalton's health when she arrived here. All 3 found her perfectly sound. Malnourished, certainly. Traumatized, absolutely. But entirely rational. Would you like to see their written assessments? The eldest magistrate frowned. That would be irregular, but... Here. Iris reached into her pocket and withdrew the compass, holding it up for all to see. My father left me this. Inside is a key to a safety deposit box at Barclays where he documented his suspicions about being poisoned. Constance claims he died of heart failure, but his own notes suggest otherwise. The coordinates are written in a code he taught me when I was 8 years old, a code based on my mother's favorite constellation. Does that sound like the action of a man who thought his daughter was mentally unsound? The room fell silent. Constance had gone pale beneath her rouge. That compass was part of the estate inventory, she tried. It should have been. It was specifically bequeathed to me in my father's true will, Iris interrupted, her voice gaining strength. The will that Lord Thorn, as executor, has properly filed with the courts. A will that you attempted to replace with a forgery, leaving me nothing but this compass, which you called worthless in front of witnesses. Tell me, Constance, if you thought I was so mentally fragile, why did you laugh when I inherited nothing? Wouldn't a concerned guardian have been distressed by my father's cruelty? You're twisting everything. Am I? Iris stepped forward, and something in her bearing made Constance step back. Let's discuss facts, gentlemen. Facts that can be verified by bank records, property deeds, and witness testimony. My father, Edmund Dalton, died 3 years ago. Within days, my stepmother claimed the estate was drowning in debt despite no evidence of gambling or poor investments. She reduced me to servant status, claiming I preferred it. She attempted to present a will that contradicted the one filed with my father's solicitor, Mr. Pritchard, who can testify to its authenticity. And now, when the truth of my inheritance comes to light, she accuses me of insanity rather than face questions about my father's sudden decline and death. The magistrates were watching Constance now, their expressions shifting. Furthermore, Iris continued, pulling a folded paper from her other pocket, I spent this afternoon reviewing the household accounts from Dalton Manor for the past 3 years. Constance has been selling off property and assets, claiming debt payments, but there are no corresponding debts in my father's ledgers. The money has simply disappeared. Nearly £50,000, gone. Perhaps the magistrates would like to investigate where those funds went. Constance's composure finally shattered. "You little witch," she hissed, her cultured accent slipping into something cruder. "You ungrateful, scheming." "That's enough, Lady Dalton." The eldest magistrate stood, his face grim. "I believe we've heard sufficient testimony. Miss Dalton appears entirely capable of managing her own affairs. In fact, she appears rather more capable than we were led to believe. This is absurd." Constance's voice rose to a shriek. "She's manipulating you just like she's manipulated Lord Thorn. Can't you see?" "What I see," the magistrate interrupted coldly, "is a young woman presenting evidence and asking reasonable questions. What I don't see is any proof of mental instability. The accusations you've made are serious, Lady Dalton. If they prove false, there could be legal consequences for attempted fraud." Constance's eyes darted between the magistrates, Lord Thorn, and Iris. Trapped. Exposed. Cornered. "We'll be investigating the matter of the missing funds," another magistrate said, standing as well. "Lady Dalton, I suggest you make yourself available for questioning." As the magistrates filed out, Constance turned to Iris with such concentrated hatred that Margot stepped protectively closer. "This isn't over," Constance said, her voice low and venomous. "You think you've won? You have no idea what I'm capable of. Your father learned. Perhaps it's time you did too." The threat hung in the air like smoke as Constance swept from the room, leaving only the echo of her rage behind. Iris's legs gave out the moment the door closed. Lord Thorn caught her before she hit the floor, his arms strong and steady as her entire body shook with delayed terror. "You were magnificent," he whispered against her hair. "Absolutely magnificent." But Iris barely heard him. All she could think about was Constance's final words. "Your father learned. Not suspected. Not imagined. Learned. She'd as good as confessed to murder." The morning coach rattled through London's grey streets, fog clinging to cobblestones like secrets refusing to lift. Iris sat across from Lord Thorn, the compass warm in her gloved hand, her heart beating an anxious rhythm against her ribs. Somewhere in the bowels of Barclay's Bank lay her father's final testimony, evidence that could destroy Constance utterly, or prove insufficient to convict. "You're quiet," Lord Thorn observed, his grey eyes studying her face. "I'm afraid," Iris admitted. "What if the evidence isn't enough? What if my father documented his suspicions but couldn't prove them? Then we find another way." His voice carried absolute certainty. "But Iris, your father was methodical. If he went to this much trouble, he had something concrete." The coach lurched suddenly, throwing Iris forward. Lord Thorn caught her, his hand steady on her arms, and for a moment they stayed frozen, faces inches apart, his breath warm against her cheek. Something electric passed between them, but he released her carefully, clearing his throat. "Driver seems nervous," he said, glancing out the window. "We're taking side streets." Iris looked out to see narrow alleyways instead of the main thoroughfare. "This isn't the way to Barclay's." Lord Thorn's expression hardened. He rapped sharply on the roof. "Driver. I said Threadneedle Street, not." The coach lurched again, this time deliberately, careening into an alley. Iris heard shouting, the panicked whinny of horses. Lord Thorn threw himself across the seat, shielding her as the coach crashed to a stop against a wall. The door wrenched open. A man in a worker's cap stood silhouetted against the foggy light, a cudgel in his hand. "The lady. Hand her over, and the gentleman walks away." "Like hell." Lord Thorn's voice was lethal quiet. "You're going to step aside, and we're going to pretend this never happened." "Can't do that, Lord. Got my orders. Lady says the girl's dangerous to herself, needs to be in proper care. Hanwell Asylum's waiting." Asylum. The word hit Iris like ice water. Constance had hired thugs to kidnap her, to lock her away in London's notorious madhouse where wealthy families disposed of inconvenient relatives. Once inside those walls, Iris would disappear forever. "No," she whispered, then louder, "no." Lord Thorn moved faster than she'd thought possible. He lunged from the coach, and suddenly there was chaos, fists connecting with flesh, grunts of pain, the clatter of the cudgel hitting cobblestones. Iris scrambled out in time to see Lord Thorn slam the thug against the alley wall, his forearm pressed against the man's throat. "Who hired you?" he demanded. "Say the name." "Lady Dalton," the thug gasped. "Paid £5, said to bring the girl to Hanwell before nightfall." Lord Thorn's jaw clenched. He released the man, who collapsed coughing. "Run. And tell your employer that if she sends anyone else, they won't walk away." The thug scrambled away into the fog. Lord Thorn turned to Iris, blood trickling from a split lip, his eyes wild with fear and fury. "Are you hurt?" "No, Julian, your face." He was on her in an instant, pulling her against him with a desperation that stole her breath. His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones as he searched her eyes. "I thought I'd lost you. When that door opened, I thought." Whatever he thought died as his mouth found hers. The kiss was fierce and desperate, tasting of blood and fear and something deeper than either. Iris's hands fisted in his coat as he kissed her like she was air itself, necessary and vital. The fog wrapped around them, the world narrowing to just this, his lips against hers, his heart thundering under her palms, the heat of him burning away 3 years of cold. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. "I cannot lose you," he whispered roughly. "I cannot watch you be taken from me. Not now. Not after," he stopped himself, but his eyes finished the sentence. "Not after I've fallen in love with you." "Julian," Iris breathed, and his name on her lips felt like a vow. A constable's whistle shrieked from the street. Reality crashed back. "We need to move," Lord Thorn said, still holding her. "She knows we're going to Barclays. She'll have people waiting. Then we go anyway." Iris straightened, steel entering her spine. "We get the evidence, and we end this." His smile was fierce and proud. "Together." "Together," she agreed. They climbed back into the damaged coach, the driver pale but unhurt. As they rattled toward Threadneedle Street, Iris's fingers found Julian's, threading between them. He squeezed once, a promise. Whatever waited at Barclays, whatever Constance had planned, they would face it as one. The vault manager at Barclays led them through corridors that smelled of old money and older secrets. Iris's hand remained in Julian's, their fingers intertwined as if the kiss in that foggy alley had rewritten something fundamental between them. Neither had spoken of it yet, but it hung in the air like a promise waiting to be kept. "Box 317, the manager announced, producing an ancient key. "Registered to Edmund Dalton, to be opened only by his daughter or legal representative." He glanced at Iris. "I'll need to see the key, Mississippi." Iris withdrew the compass with trembling fingers, opened it, and handed him the tiny brass key. It fit perfectly into the second lock. The box slid open with a whisper of metal on metal. Inside lay 3 leather journals, a stack of letters tied with black ribbon, and a sealed envelope marked simply, "For Iris, when she's ready to fight." Her father's handwriting. After 3 years of believing herself forgotten, here was proof that every moment of his decline had been spent protecting her, documenting everything, preparing her for this war. Julian stepped back, giving her privacy. "I'll keep watch outside." But Iris caught his sleeve. "Stay. Please. I can't do this alone." Something softened in his expression. "You're not alone. Not anymore." She opened the first journal with hands that shook. The dates began 4 months before her father's death. March 15th, felt dizzy after breakfast. Constance insists it's my heart, but I've never had trouble before. The tea tasted bitter today. March 23, weakness in my limbs. Dr. Hartley says I'm working too hard. But I know my own body. Something is wrong. April 2, found Constance in my study, searching through my papers. She claimed to be organizing, but her expression when I entered, guilty. Calculating. I've secured my real will with Julian. Page after page, her father had documented his suspicions, his symptoms, his growing certainty that he was being poisoned. But more than that, he documented evidence. April 12, saved a sample of the tea Constance prepared. Sealed it in a vial. If I'm right, arsenic leaves traces in hair and nails even after death. Julian knows where to find them. Iris looked up sharply. He took samples. Julian moved to her side, reading over her shoulder. His jaw tightened. Edmund was brilliant. If those samples still exist, we can test them. Arsenic poisoning can be proven months, even years after death. The second journal contained financial records, meticulous documentation of every pound Constance had embezzled, every property she'd sold, every lie she'd told about debts that didn't exist. Edmund had been building a legal case, piece by piece, knowing he might not survive to present it. The third journal was different. Personal. Letters to Iris that he'd never sent, thoughts he'd never spoken aloud. My dearest navigator. If you're reading this, I've failed to protect myself, but I pray I've succeeded in protecting you. Constance married me for money and position, but she underestimated you, my darling girl. She sees weakness where I see strength, stupidity where I see kindness, worthlessness where I see infinite value. You are your mother's daughter, brilliant, brave, capable of navigating any storm. The compass was hers, as you know. She used it to find her way through the world, and now I'm giving it to you so you can find your way back to yourself. Trust Julian. He's been my truest friend, and I've made him swear to see you restored. But more than that, trust yourself. Your mind is sharp, your heart is good, and your worth has never been dependent on what Constance or anyone else thinks of you. You are enough, my navigator. You have always been enough. All my love, Papa. The tears came without permission, hot and cleansing and 3 years overdue. Julian's arms came around her from behind, solid and warm, letting her shake apart without trying to stop it. He knew, she whispered. He knew she was killing him, and he used the time he had left to save me. He loved you. Julian's voice was rough against her hair. More than his own life. And he was right about everything, your strength, your brilliance, your worth. Iris turned in his arms, the journals pressed between them. I spent 3 years believing I deserved it. The abuse, the degradation, all of it. I thought I must have been worthless if my own father left me nothing. You were never worthless. You were protected. Every moment of silence was strategy, every hidden piece of evidence was a weapon he was forging for you. Julian cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away tears. And now you have everything you need to destroy her. The sealed envelope crackled as Iris opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, locations where Edmund had hidden the physical evidence. Hair samples. Tea samples. Receipts for arsenic purchased under false names. Testimony from a servant he'd paid to watch Constance. Everything needed for a murder conviction. And at the bottom, an address in Kent where a doctor named Ashford had agreed to perform the tests and provide expert testimony. She thought she'd gotten away with it, Iris said, and her voice was steel wrapped in silk. She thought burying him meant burying the truth. She underestimated him. And she underestimated you. Julian pressed a kiss to her forehead. What do we do now? Iris looked at the evidence spread before her, her father's final gift, bought with his life. She thought of Constance's threat in the drawing room, of the thugs hired to lock her away, of 3 years spent as a ghost in her own life. She thought of Julian's kiss in the alley, of Margot's fierce friendship, of finding her voice after years of silence. Now, she said, meeting his eyes with newfound certainty, we take this to the magistrates. We have her arrested for murder and embezzlement. And we make sure she faces justice for what she did. The Queen's ball is in 3 weeks, Julian said carefully. All of society will be there, including Constance. She'll be expecting us to hide, to build our case quietly. But if we attended, if we presented ourselves publicly with you as my ward and legitimate heir, she'd have to face me in front of everyone. Iris felt a fierce smile curve her lips. No hiding behind locked doors or hired thugs. Just the truth, laid bare for all to see. It's dangerous. She's desperate now. Good. Iris gathered the journals, the letters, the evidence. Let her be desperate. I'm done being afraid. I'm done being silent. It's time everyone knew who Constance Dalton really is. Julian's smile matched hers, sharp and proud. Then we go to war. Publicly. As they left Barclays with her father's legacy secured in a locked case, Iris felt something shift inside her. The frightened girl who'd cowered under Constance's cruelty was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth, who held the truth like a sword, who had love and allies and purpose. Constance had spent 3 years trying to break her. She'd succeeded only in forging something stronger. 3 weeks passed like the slow turning of a key in a lock, each day clicking another tumbler into place. Iris spent her mornings with Julian reviewing legal strategy, her afternoons with Margot learning the intricate dance of court politics, her evenings writing out her testimony until the words were carved into her memory. The evidence sat locked in Julian's safe, journals, samples, receipts, all waiting for the perfect moment to detonate. But evidence alone wouldn't destroy Constance. Social ruin would. The ton is vicious, Margot explained, lacing Iris into a corset that actually fit for the first time in 3 years. But they're also predictable. They worship power and despise weakness. When you walk into that ballroom tonight, you need to embody everything Constance claimed you weren't: elegant, composed, worthy. No pressure then, Iris said wryly, watching her reflection in the mirror. The gown Margot had commissioned was sapphire silk that brought out the grey-green of her eyes, cut in the latest fashion with delicate embroidery at the bodice. Her hair was swept up in an intricate arrangement, small diamonds, Julian's mother's diamonds, glittering at her throat. She looked like someone who belonged in a palace. She barely recognized herself. "You're stunning," Margot said, her voice unusually serious. "But more importantly, you look like exactly who you are, a wealthy heiress who's been kept prisoner in her own home. Let them see what she tried to hide." A knock at the door, and Julian entered. He stopped dead, his eyes widening as they traveled over her. The look on his face made heat flood Iris's cheeks. Margot grinned, slipping past her brother. "Give you two a moment. Don't be late. The Queen waits for no one." The door clicked shut. Julian crossed the room slowly, deliberately, like a man afraid sudden movement might shatter something precious. "Iris," he said, and her name in his mouth sounded like prayer. If you say I clean up well, I'll throw something at you." His laugh was low and warm. "I was going to say you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. But I've thought that since the day you stood in my study holding that compass with tears on your face and steel in your spine." The words stole her breath. They hadn't spoken about the kiss, about what it meant, too consumed with preparations and strategy. But now, in this quiet moment before war, the truth hung between them like something inevitable. "Julian," she began, but he shook his head. "After tonight. When this is done and you're free and you have your life back." He took her hand, pressed his lips to her knuckles in a gesture too intimate to be merely formal. "Then we'll talk about what this is. What we are. But first, let's destroy the woman who tried to destroy you." Iris's fingers tightened on his. "Together. Always." The queen's ballroom blazed with 1,000 candles, their light reflecting off gold fixtures and crystal chandeliers until the entire space seemed to shimmer. Iris descended the grand staircase on Julian's arm, aware of every eye turning, every whisper starting. She kept her chin high, her expression serene, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "Miss Iris Dalton," the herald announced, his voice carrying across the vast room, "ward of Lord Julian Thorne, Duke of Ashbourne." The whispers intensified. She caught fragments, thought she was a servant, disappeared for years, look at those diamonds. And then she saw Constance. Her stepmother stood near the queen's dais, resplendent in burgundy silk, surrounded by fawning admirers. But when her eyes found Iris, her glass of champagne froze halfway to her lips. The color drained from her face so completely that her rouge stood out like paint on porcelain. Iris smiled. The same cold, calculating smile Constance had perfected. "Courage," Julian murmured, guiding her forward through the crowd that parted like water around them. They hadn't taken 3 steps before a woman in purple silk materialized before them, sharp-eyed, imperious, with the bearing of someone who'd never been denied anything in her life. "Lord Thorne," she said, her assessing gaze fixed on Iris. "You've been hiding this one." "Why?" "Your Majesty." Julian bowed, and Iris dropped into the deepest curtsy she could manage. The Queen of England, in the flesh, studying her like a specimen under glass. "Rise, child." The Queen's voice was surprisingly warm. "I've heard such conflicting reports about you. Lady Dalton claims you're a troubled girl prone to delusions. Yet Lord Thorne, whose judgment I trust implicitly, presents you as an heiress wrongfully dispossessed. Which is it?" The ballroom had gone silent. Hundreds of people watching, waiting. This was the moment, speak now or be forever defined by Constance's lies. Iris lifted her chin. "Your Majesty, I am Edmund Dalton's daughter and sole heir. My stepmother poisoned my father, embezzled my inheritance, and reduced me to servitude in my own home. I have documentation, physical evidence, and witness testimony. I came tonight not to ask for your judgment, but to ensure that when the truth comes to light, all of society bears witness to justice." The Queen's eyebrows rose. Behind her, Iris heard Constance's sharp intake of breath, the beginning of a protest. "That's quite an accusation," the Queen said mildly. "Lady Dalton, would you care to respond?" Constance stepped forward, her composure rebuilt, her smile sympathetic. "Your Majesty, my stepdaughter has suffered greatly since her father's death. The trauma has created delusions." Iris interrupted, her voice carrying clear and strong. "Then explain the £50,000 you embezzled from my father's accounts. Explain the arsenic purchases made under false names. Explain why my father's final will, properly witnessed and filed, contradicts the forgery you presented." "Your Majesty, she's been coached." "By whom?" "The Duke, who has no financial interest in my inheritance." "Or by my own intelligence, which you spent 3 years trying to convince me I didn't possess." Iris felt the words flowing now, unstoppable, 3 years of silence breaking like a dam. "You called me worthless. You laughed when I inherited nothing but a compass. But that compass led me to the truth you tried to bury. My father documented everything, Constance. Every symptom, every suspicious cup of tea, every lie you told. And now the magistrates have it all." The ballroom erupted in gasps and whispers. Constance's face had gone from pale to flushed, her careful mask cracking. "You ungrateful," she lunged forward, and suddenly they were face to face, the Queen herself stepping back as if to let them play out this scene. "I took you in. I raised you after your father's death. You murdered him." Iris's voice was cold as winter. "And when the arsenic in his hair is tested, when the servants testify, when the receipts are examined, you'll hang for it." "Enough." The Queen's voice cracked like a whip. The room fell silent. She looked between them, her expression unreadable. Then she turned to someone in the crowd. "Lord Chief Justice, I believe you're needed. Lady Dalton, you will surrender yourself for questioning." Immediately, guards appeared as if summoned from thin air. Constance looked around wildly, seeking escape, allies, anything. But society had already turned. The women who'd been fawning over her minutes before had stepped away, their fans hiding scandalized faces. "You'll regret this," Constance hissed at Iris as the guards took her arms. "I'll make you regret." "The only thing I regret," Iris said clearly, "is not finding my voice sooner." As they led Constance away, her protests echoing through the ballroom, Iris felt Julian's hand at her back, steady and sure. The Queen was speaking to the Lord Chief Justice, gesturing. Margot appeared at Iris's other side, squeezing her hand. "Well," Margot whispered, "you certainly know how to make an entrance." Iris's laugh was slightly hysterical. She'd just accused her stepmother of murder in front of the Queen and 500 members of high society. She'd broken every rule of decorum and propriety. And she'd never felt more powerful in her life. The Queen turned back to her, and Iris braced for censure. Instead, Her Majesty smiled, small, approving, dangerous. "Miss Dalton," she said, loud enough for all to hear, "I believe we should discuss the restoration of your father's holdings over tea. Tomorrow, 3 o'clock. Don't be late." It was a command. It was also an endorsement. Society would follow the Queen's lead. And the Queen had chosen Iris. The morning after the ball should have been triumphant. Instead, Iris woke to Margot shaking her shoulder, her face pale as death. "They've released her." Iris sat up so fast her vision spun. "What?" "Constance. She's out. Someone posted her bail, an enormous sum, and she walked free 2 hours ago." Margot's hands twisted in her skirts. "Julian's downstairs with the magistrates now, but Iris, there's more." The dread in her friend's voice made Iris's stomach turn to ice. "They found something. Letters, supposedly written by Julian to your father, discussing how they'd manipulate you into signing over your inheritance once you came of age. Letters suggesting this whole thing was planned, that Julian befriended Edmund specifically to get access to his fortune through you." The words didn't make sense at first. Then they did, and Iris felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. "That's impossible. Julian would never." "I know that. You know that. But the letters are convincing. Constance claims she found them among your father's papers, that she's been protecting you from Julian's scheme all along. She's turned the entire narrative on its head." Margot grabbed Iris's hands. "She's brilliant and evil, and she's making Julian look like the villain." Iris dressed mechanically, her mind racing. This was Constance's final card: destroy the one person Iris trusted completely, isolate her, make her doubt everything. If she could drive a wedge between Iris and Julian, make society believe he'd been manipulating her, then everything they'd built would crumble. She found Julian in his study, standing at the window with his back rigid as iron. 3 magistrates sat in chairs arranged like a tribunal, their expressions grave. "Miss Dalton," the eldest began, "we need to ask you some questions about your relationship with Lord Thorn." "My relationship?" Iris's voice came out harder than she intended. "You mean the relationship where he protected me from a murderer? Where he helped me reclaim my inheritance with no benefit to himself? That's what we need to establish." The magistrate produced a stack of letters, the paper yellowed with age. "These were found in Lady Dalton's possession. They suggest Lord Thorn's interest in you was, shall we say, financially motivated from the beginning." Iris took the letters with shaking hands. The handwriting was Julian's, or a masterful forgery. The content made her sick. "Edmund, the girl is nearly of age. Once she inherits, we'll have access to everything. She trusts me already. This will be simpler than we thought. The stepdaughter suspects nothing. Keep her docile and ignorant. I'll handle the rest when the time comes. Your death will serve our purposes well. The girl will be vulnerable, desperate for protection. I'll be positioned perfectly. These are lies. But even as Iris said it, doubt wormed its way into her chest. Julian had befriended her father years ago. He'd known about the inheritance before she did. He'd been positioned perfectly to swoop in after Edmund's death. No. No, she knew him. She knew his character, his honor, the way he'd looked at her like she mattered beyond money or property. Miss Dalton, the magistrate said gently, we understand this must be difficult. But we must consider the possibility that you've been manipulated. Lord Thorne stands to gain significantly from marrying you. Your fortune would become his. I haven't agreed to marry him. The words came out automatically, defensive. But he's led you to believe he cares for you, hasn't he? Made you dependent on his protection, his guidance. Isolated you from your stepmother, who may have been trying to protect you all along. Iris looked at Julian. He stood frozen, his jaw clenched, saying nothing. Why wasn't he defending himself? Why wasn't he fighting back? Julian, she said, and his name cracked in her throat. Tell them. Tell them these letters are forgeries. He turned finally, and the look in his eyes was devastation. I can't prove they are. The words hit like a physical blow. What? The handwriting is mine. Or close enough that experts might disagree. The paper is old, the dates align with when I first met your father. I can't prove I didn't write them, Iris. I can only swear to you that I didn't. That's not good enough. Her voice rose, desperate. You're the Duke of Ashbourne. You have resources, power. Which makes me look more guilty, not less. His voice was hollow. A powerful duke befriends a wealthy man with a young daughter. The man dies under suspicious circumstances. The duke swoops in to rescue the daughter and position himself to control her fortune. It's exactly the sort of scheme society would believe. But you didn't, Iris stopped, hearing her own doubt. She hated herself for it, but it was there, a tiny poisonous seed Constance had planted. Julian saw it in her face. Something in his expression died. You're questioning it, he said quietly. You're wondering if any of this was real. No. You should question it. He turned back to the window, his shoulders rigid. You should protect yourself. Take the inheritance, walk away from me, build your life without the shadow of doubt Constance has cast. I won't blame you. Your Grace, one of the magistrates cleared his throat, given these allegations, we must recommend that Miss Dalton be placed under alternative guardianship until this matter is resolved. We cannot allow you to maintain control over her person or her assets. Iris felt the trap closing. If she stayed with Julian, society would say she was his dupe. If she left, Constance would find another way to get to her. Either way, she lost. There is, the magistrate continued, one option. Lady Dalton has offered to take Miss Dalton back into her care, under court supervision, until the truth can be established. Absolutely not. Julian's voice was ice. That woman is a murderer. That woman, the magistrate said carefully, has not been convicted of anything. Whereas these letters suggest you, my lord, may have been complicit in Edmund Dalton's death. The room spun. Iris looked at the letters, at the magistrates, at Julian's rigid back. Constance had done it, she'd found the perfect weapon. Not evidence of her own innocence, but doubt about Julian's guilt. I need to speak with Lord Thorne, Iris said, her voice steadier than she felt. Alone. The magistrates exchanged glances but stood. 5 minutes, Miss Dalton. Then we need your decision. The door closed. Silence pressed down like a weight. Julian didn't turn around. Look at me, Iris said. I can't. His voice was raw. If I look at you and see doubt in your eyes, it will break something in me that I won't be able to repair. Iris crossed the room, put herself between him and the window, forced him to meet her gaze. His eyes were storm-gray and devastated, a man bracing for the final blow. "Did you write those letters?" she asked. "No." "Did you befriend my father to get to my inheritance?" "No." "Did you plan any of this, his death, my rescue, any of it?" "No." His hands came up to frame her face, trembling. "Iris, I loved your father like a brother. I would have died to save him. And I fell in love with you watching you refuse to break under 3 years of hell. Not because of your money. Because of who you are, brilliant and brave and stronger than you ever believed." She searched his eyes, looking for lies, for manipulation, for any hint that Constance might be right. She found only truth. Raw and bleeding and desperate, but truth. "Then that's enough," she said. "Iris. She wants me to doubt you. She needs me to doubt you because without you, I'm alone and vulnerable and she can destroy me." Iris took his hands, held them tight. "But I'm not alone. I have you, and Margot, and allies, and most importantly, I have myself. My own mind, my own judgment, my own voice. And my voice says you're telling the truth. What if I'm not? What if this is all a long manipulation? Then I'd rather be a fool who trusted and lost than a coward who let fear make my choices." She pulled him down until their foreheads touched. "I choose you, Julian. I choose us. Whatever comes." His breath shuddered out. "Society will crucify you. They'll say you're besotted, manipulated, a naive girl throwing away her fortune for a handsome face. Let them." Iris smiled, fierce and certain. "I stopped caring what society thinks the moment I stood before the Queen and called my stepmother a murderer. We'll prove these letters are forgeries. We'll expose whatever Constance paid someone to create them. And we'll do it together." "You're sure?" His voice broke on the question. "Because Iris, if you choose me and it destroys you." She kissed him. Hard and certain and full of everything she couldn't say. When she pulled back, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I'm sure," she said. "Now let's go tell those magistrates that Constance Dalton underestimated us both." Outside the study door, the magistrates waited. Beyond them, Iris knew, Constance was waiting too, confident this final trap would work. But Constance had made one fatal mistake. She'd taught Iris to survive hell. She'd forged her into someone who couldn't be broken by doubt or fear or isolation. And now that weapon was turning against her. The courtroom was packed to suffocation, every seat filled with nobility hungry for scandal's conclusion. Iris sat in the witness box, her hands folded calmly in her lap despite the chaos her testimony had unleashed. Beside the prosecutor's table, the evidence from her father's safety deposit box lay arranged like weapons: journals, letters, vials containing hair samples that had tested positive for arsenic. Constance sat across the room in the defendant's box, her elegant composure finally, irrevocably shattered. The forgery expert had just finished testifying about the letters implicating Julian, perfect recreations of his handwriting, created using samples stolen from Edmund's correspondence, aged artificially with tea and heat. The forger had been found, had confessed, had named Constance as the one who'd commissioned and paid for them. Now it was Iris's turn to speak the final truth. "Miss Dalton," the prosecutor said gently, "you've heard the evidence regarding your father's death. The arsenic found in his preserved hair samples. The servant testimony about Lady Dalton's private tea preparations. Your father's own documentation. In your own words, what do you believe happened to Edmund Dalton?" Iris met Constance's eyes across the courtroom. Her stepmother's face was a mask of hatred now, all pretense of concern abandoned. "My stepmother murdered my father slowly over the course of 4 months, Iris said, her voice carrying clear and certain. She poisoned him with arsenic, small doses mixed into tea she prepared personally, always sending servants away so there would be no witnesses. He knew what was happening. He documented everything, every symptom, every suspicious meal, every moment of weakness. He knew he was dying, and he used the time he had left to build a case against her and protect me. Why didn't he expose her while he was alive? Because he had no proof a court would accept, and because he feared for my safety. Iris's throat tightened but her voice held steady. He believed that if he accused her and failed, she would turn society against him and leave me vulnerable. But if he died and the truth came out after, I would be protected by his will, by his friends, by the evidence he'd hidden where only I could find it. He sacrificed himself for you. He did. The tears came now, but Iris let them fall without shame. He taught me to be brave, to navigate any storm, to trust myself. And then he gave his life to ensure I'd have the chance to use those lessons. The courtroom was silent. Even the hungry scandal-seekers seemed moved. Lady Dalton, the prosecutor turned to where Constance sat, rigid with fury. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Constance stood slowly. For a moment, Iris thought she might maintain her innocence to the end. Instead, something in her snapped. Defense? Her laugh was bitter as poison. What defense can there be against a dead man's paranoid fantasies and a manipulated girl's delusions? You all sit there so righteous, so certain of your judgment, but none of you know what it's like to have nothing, to be nothing, to claw your way up only to be trapped by a foolish man's sentiment for a worthless daughter. Lady Dalton, the judge warned. He was weak, Constance spat, beyond caring now. Edmund Dalton with his books and his horses and his precious navigator. He had everything and appreciated nothing. I made him important. I made his household run. I gave him connections, status, purpose. And how did he repay me? By leaving everything to her. She stabbed a finger at Iris. A girl who can't even remember her own mother, who spent 3 years as a servant without once fighting back. She didn't deserve his fortune. She didn't deserve anything. So you took it. Julian's voice cut through the courtroom. He stood from the gallery, every inch the Duke, his presence commanding silence. You murdered a man for money that was never yours. You tortured his daughter for years because she had what you wanted. And when that wasn't enough, you tried to destroy me to isolate her completely. You're no better. Constance whirled on him. Swooping in like some righteous savior when we both know you want her fortune as much as I did. The only difference is you're better at pretending to care. No, Iris said, standing from the witness box. The difference is he actually does care. About me, not what I own. He helped me find my voice, not because it benefited him, but because he believed I deserved to be heard. Something you never understood, Constance. I was never worthless. You just needed me to believe I was so you could control me. Constance's face contorted with rage. You self-righteous little. Enough. The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. Lady Constance Dalton, this court finds you guilty of murder by poisoning, embezzlement, fraud, and attempted kidnapping. You are hereby sentenced to be hanged by the neck until dead, sentenced to be carried out within the month. The courtroom erupted. Constance screamed something, but the guards were already dragging her away, her elegant facade destroyed completely. Iris watched her go, feeling nothing but a hollow relief. No satisfaction in her stepmother's destruction, just the quiet certainty that justice had finally arrived. Julian was at her side in an instant, his hand finding hers. It's over. It's over, she echoed, and the words felt like absolution. Outside the courtroom, society waited, the same people who'd watched her humiliation at the ball now hungry to witness her vindication. Margot pushed through the crowd to embrace her, laughing and crying simultaneously. You were magnificent, she whispered. Absolutely magnificent. The next hours passed in a blur of congratulations and curious questions and people who suddenly remembered they'd always believed in her. The Queen sent a note, justice well served. Tea tomorrow at 4. We have much to discuss. Iris tucked it into her pocket like a talisman. But it wasn't until she and Julian were finally alone in the Thornfield library, the same room where this had all begun, that she let herself fully breathe. "I keep thinking I should feel different," she said, curled into the leather chair where she'd first learned the truth about her inheritance. "Triumphant or vengeful or something. But I just feel tired." Julian knelt before her, taking her hands. "You've been fighting for your life for 3 years. Longer, really. You're allowed to be tired. What happens now?" The question hung between them, weighted with everything they hadn't discussed. The kisses in alleys and libraries, the partnership forged in crisis, the love confessed in desperate moments but never properly claimed. "Now," Julian said slowly, his grey eyes holding hers, "we have a conversation we've been putting off." He took a breath, and she realized he was nervous. The Duke of Ashbourne, who'd faced down murderers and magistrates without flinching, was nervous talking to her. "Iris Dalton, I have loved you since the day you stood in my study and chose courage over comfort. I will love you whether you're a wealthy heiress or penniless. Whether you choose to marry me or walk away. Whether. Julian. You want a grand wedding or a quiet one or none at all, because what matters is. Julian." She pressed her fingers to his lips, smiling. "You're babbling. I'm nervous." He caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. "I'm asking you to marry me, and I'm terrified you'll say no." "Why would I say no?" "Because I can't prove the depth of my feeling. Because society will always wonder if I wanted your fortune. Because you deserve better than doubt and questions, Anne." This time she kissed him to silence him, pouring 3 years of survival and 6 weeks of partnership and every moment of trust she'd chosen into it. When they broke apart, he was breathless and smiling. "Is that a yes?" he asked. "That's a yes to you, to us, to whatever comes next." She touched his face, this man who'd seen her at her lowest and loved her anyway. "I spent 3 years believing I was worthless. You helped me remember I'm not. How could I not love you for that?" "Not for that," he corrected gently. "Love me because we're partners. Because we're equals. Because we chose each other." "Then I choose you," Iris said. "Every day, I choose you." His kiss was answer and promise and beginning all at once. Outside, autumn was turning to winter, cold and clean and new. Inside, 2 people who'd survived hell sat by the fire and planned a future built on truth and trust and the kind of love that couldn't be shaken by doubt or destroyed by lies. And somewhere in the city, in a prison cell awaiting execution, Constance Dalton finally understood the cost of underestimating the girl she'd called worthless. The gardens of Dalton Manor bloomed with life again, transformed from Constance's cold formality into something warm and welcoming. Iris stood at the window of what had once been her prison, watching women arrive for the afternoon session, seamstresses learning bookkeeping, servants' daughters studying literature, young widows discovering they had options beyond remarriage or poverty. The Dalton Foundation for Women's Independence had been her first official act as Lady Thorne, Duchess of Ashbourne. Julian had supported it without question, understanding that reclaiming her father's estate meant transforming it into something meaningful. "Your Grace," Mrs. Fletcher appeared in the doorway, barely suppressing a smile. "The twins are awake from their nap and demanding their mama." Iris turned from the window, her hand instinctively going to her still flat stomach where a 3rd child grew. "Tell them I'll be right there." She passed through halls that no longer held ghosts, only memories she'd made peace with. Her father's study remained exactly as he'd left it, preserved as a library where the Foundation's students came to read. The compass sat on the mantel in a place of honor, no longer a secret weapon but a reminder, you are enough. You have always been enough. In the nursery, 2 dark-haired toddlers, Edmund and Helena, named for the grandparents they'd never meet, climbed over their father like he was furniture designed for that purpose. Julian looked up as she entered, his eyes still holding that mixture of love and wonder that hadn't faded with marriage or time or the beautiful chaos of their life together. "Reinforcements," he announced to the children. "Your mother has arrived to restore order." "Order is overrated," Iris said, sinking onto the floor beside them. Edmund immediately crawled into her lap, while Helena continued her assault on Julian's dignity. This, she thought, was what her father had died protecting. Not money or property or titles, but this, the freedom to love and be loved, to build something meaningful, to use her voice to help others find theirs. The freedom to be simply, completely, enough. That evening, after the children were asleep and the foundation students had returned to their homes, Iris and Julian stood in the garden where Edmund Dalton's memorial stone marked the spot beneath an old oak tree. She placed fresh flowers there, as she did every week. "Do you think he'd be proud?" she asked. Julian's arm came around her waist. "I think he'd be astonished. Not that you succeeded, he always knew you would. But at how thoroughly you've transformed pain into purpose." Iris leaned into him, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. Somewhere in London, in an unmarked grave, Constance Dalton lay forgotten. Her daughter Rowena had fled to the continent after the trial, married a merchant, and never returned. The magistrates who'd been bought had lost their positions. Every piece of Constance's carefully constructed lies had crumbled to dust. But here, in the home that had once been her prison, Iris had built something that would outlast all of them, a legacy of women helping women, of voices being heard, of worth being recognized regardless of circumstance or birth. "I used to think the compass was the inheritance," she said softly. "The key to everything my father left me. But it wasn't, was it?" "No," Julian agreed. "The inheritance was you. Your mind, your courage, your refusal to stay broken. He didn't leave you money, Iris. He left you yourself." She turned in his arms, this man who'd helped her remember who she was and then loved every piece of that person. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. For waiting while I found my voice. For being my true north when I lost my way." Julian smiled, the expression soft and private and meant only for her. "We found our way together. That's what partners do." Above them, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Somewhere, Iris liked to imagine, her father was watching, proud not just of what she'd become, but of what she'd always been beneath the fear and doubt and years of being told she was worthless. A woman who'd survived. A woman who'd fought back. A woman who'd learned that her voice was the most powerful weapon she'd ever need. The compass had shown her the way. But she'd had the courage to walk the path herself. And that, in the end, was the only inheritance that truly mattered.